Hello YouTube! I just stumbled on this video and why buying a house is a lousy investment, and of course my good friend and coworker just tells me that they just put an offer on a house yesterday. So sorry this video is a day short, but I just wanted to play this video and probably in most of its entirety and get your reaction and talk about.
Because I really felt I wanted to use the capital for other purposes, but that was a way different environment.
Buying a house is usually a lousy investment. This 8-word sentence is enough to start a fight if you say it to the wrong person. But please, before you come at me with pitchforks, I'm not the one saying this. This is coming from legendary investor Warren Buffett. Let's just say he knows a thing.
And I have a question. It's not really related to intrinsic value or any of that stock stuff, but more on houses. I'm still quite young. I don't have a house yet, and I'm thinking about buying a house someday soon. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to put a down payment, which means I might have to share or sell my shares. And I was wondering if you can provide some insight on when is the best time to buy a house and how much down payment you should be putting down in relation to interest rates and also in relation to available cash and the stock market.
Well, Charlie's going to give you an answer to that in a second. I'll just relate one story, which was when I got married. We did have about $10,000 starting off, and I told Susie, I said, now you know, there's two choices. It's up to you. We can either buy a house, which will use up all my capital and clean me out, and it'll be like a carpenter who's had his tools taken away from him, or you could let me work on this, and someday, who knows, maybe I'll even buy a little bit larger house than would otherwise be the case. So she was very understanding on that point, and we waited until 1956. We got married in 1952, and I decided to buy a house when the down payment was about 10% or so of my net worth, because I really felt I wanted to use the capital for other purposes. But that was a way different environment in terms of what was available to buy. In effect, if you have the house you want to buy, I definitely believe in just going out and probably getting the job done. But in effect, you're probably making something in the area of a 7 or 8% investment implicitly when you do it. So you'll have to figure out your own equation from that. Charlie probably has better advice on that. He's a big homeowner.
I mean, my personal opinion on that, Buffett just said you're implicitly getting a 7 or 8% return on your money when you buy a home. My opinion would be you get 2%. And why is that? Well, inflation historically has been 2% if you average out all the years. And the good thing about homes and stocks is they keep ahead of inflation. So with stocks, you're getting, well, if you invest in the S&P the last 40 years, you got a 10% return or whatever. That's not the case today. You're not going to get a 10% return now, because the Vanguard VOO is $400 and some a share now, and Warren Buffett's stock, a couple of years ago was $170, and I would much rather have, put $170 to buy a share of Berkshire Hathaway B shares than $466 in the S&P 500. But of course, since then, the Berkshire shares have shot up, and now I don't even think there's much difference between the the B shares and BOO. Let me see. Let me look it up real quick. Yeah, Berkshire Hathaway B shares are $411.57. And VOO was $476.60. And it was even higher than that, but it took a kind of a steep downturn the last day or so. But anyway, I mean, home prices where I am have gone up 14% year over year the last 2 years, and in some places they've gone up 40% year over year, and that's just unsustainable. That's just a fluke. We're in a bubble. We're on the verge of another housing crash, but it's even worse than that because we're in an everything bubble. We got Bitcoin at $70,000 for a coin that's worthless, in my opinion. You know, you got the S&P 500. I don't know, 6 or 7 stocks now make up 30% or so of the S&P 500. So when you think you're diversifying within 500 companies, you're really not. You're really putting all your eggs really in those 8 stocks. Now, you know, I'm a big fan of Google. I'm a big fan of Microsoft. The only reason I don't own them is they're so big. They're, you know, the chances of going from 2 trillion to 4 trillion are less than you know, a stock that I own that might be $1 going from $1 to $2. So it's a lot easier for a stock to go from $1 to $2 than it is for a company that's 1 trillion to go to 2 trillion. And, you know, plus you got government pressures where, you know, the Democrats say tax the rich, tax the rich. But the funny thing is there's more Democrats that are rich than there are Republicans by a long shot. And Warren Buffett's a prime example of a Democrat who the richest man in the world is almost never paid a tax in his life. I mean, he doesn't sell stocks. He doesn't pay a dividend, so he gets no tax on his dividends. He never sells, so he never almost, I mean, every once in a while, yeah, he has to pay capital gains taxes, but most of the time he holds for the long term and never sells. And as a CEO of this company, I mean, he doesn't pay himself a salary, so he doesn't have an income. And when he dies, he's going to give 99% of his wealth away to charity. So again, you're getting you're escaping the tax laws, and you know, it's funny. You know, they're talking about let's pay our fair share and tax the rich, and yet you got the rich not even paying a dime in a lot of cases. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Warren Buffett. You know, he's not a Christian. You know, I personally believe Christianity, and you know, I'm not a perfect person by any means, but you can have all the wealth in the world, but if you choose the wrong religion or don't have a religion, you know, I think you're in for a heap of hurt down the road. But anyway, inflation historically is 2%, and stocks and real estate keep ahead of inflation, so it doesn't erase your purchasing power. Let's say Aunt Jean works at Chick-fil-A, and she's worked at Chick-fil-A for 50 years, and she's still getting the same salary that she got 50 years ago. And the government has taxed her 2% every year for the last 50 years, which means her purchasing power she's lost 100% of her purchasing power. 50 years times 2% each year is 100%. Whereas real estate at least keeps pace with inflation historically. Now, if inflation, let's say it's 14% right now, and I think there's going to be a crash, and let's say you do get a 7 or 8% return on your investment, you're still going to be underwater based on inflation. And my personal opinion is that they cannot raise the interest rates anymore. So I think we're at a peak. I mean, granted, years ago, the interest rates were 18%, but back then you could get 15% on your money from buying government bonds. I think my parents, when they bought their first house, they paid 12 or 13%. But again, that was back when you could get 15% on the safest thing in the world, which is what most people think is the safest thing in the world, is long-term government bonds. But the environment we're in now, we're in an everything bubble. Food is high. Gas is high. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we had $2 gas. Now we got $3.30. I mean, that's almost a double. We got rent is high, and I remember that guy that had the party of the rent is too damn high party. Well, I think if he ran again today, he might get some follow. The rent is too damn high. The rent is too damn high. And so you got an everything bubble. You got, but the bond market is high. The stock market is too high. The real estate is too high. The food is too high. Gas is too high. Everything that you can think of is too high. And this is a difficult time to be an investor because you don't know where. There's no safe haven. I mean, a lot of people think it's gold. A lot of people think it's Bitcoin. Gold, in my opinion, has always been $1,300 an ounce. So I was buying it when it was, $1,100, when it was $1,000 or whatever. But I'm not buying at $2,000 or $2,200. And in a few years, when we start asteroid mining, there's more gold and stuff in one asteroid than is even on this whole entire planet. So what happens then to gold when the amount of gold in the world or in our universe doubles or triples or quadruples? I mean, obviously gold's going to go down. But just like Jim Rogers said, I think silver is a good place. He mentioned sugar. Sugar's 60% of his all-time high. Gas is 50% of his all-time high. I think, I'm big on gas, and I love the dividends from those gas companies. But anyway, let me shut up and listen to these two great investors talk a little more.
In both senses of the word.
I think the time to buy a house is when you need one.
And when do you need one?
Well, I have very old-fashioned ideas on that too. The single people, I don't care if they ever get a house.
When do you need one if you're married, Shirley? I'll follow up here for a minute. You need one when your wife wants one.
Yeah. I think you've got that exactly right.
As a bit of background, there's a mindset that renting is throwing away money or that buying a home is always a great investment. While these statements do have some merit, as Warren Buffett pointed out in that clip, they don't tell the whole picture. Most people just look at the monthly mortgage payment and compare that to what it would cost to rent a similar place. They see that the mortgage payment is the same as what the rent would be and say, yep, that's it. Renting a home is a waste of money. May as well buy. However, there is much more that goes into it than just that.
Now look, I'm going to say on my personal situation, and my rent is less than $500 a month, and I could afford a $1,500 mortgage or a $2,000 a month mortgage if I really wanted to, or maybe not now, but maybe in the past when I was definitely making close to 10 grand a month. When you're making 10 grand a month, who cares about 2? You still got 8 to play with. But in my own personal situation, if instead of buying or renting a $1,500 a month house or paying a mortgage on it for instead I can use that $1,000 a month and invest that money and get a better return on my money than what the house is going to be worth or whatever. Granted, a house, like I said, in my personal opinion, is only going to go up 2%. And it may not even do that, because if you live, let's say you live in Florida, and a big storm comes and a big wave comes and knocks your house down. Well, guess how much your house is worth now? It's worth nothing. You might have paid $300,000 or $400,000 for it, but if a big wave comes and knocks it down, and you're on the ocean front, and once your house gets washed away, guess what? You can't build a new house on it. You're just a sucker, and you just lost that 300 or 400 grand. And near where I am, there was a town that had, or a city that I don't know if it was a town or a city, but anyway, they had a big flood, and most of the people there had no flood insurance. So you might have wind insurance or whatever kind of insurance, but you got to have the exact insurance for the exact thing. You might have insurance on your home, but you need the exact insurance for that exact thing. And as a believer in the Bible, in these end times, Israel became a nation in 1948. The parable of the fig tree, where the good and the bad figs came together. And I believe we're in the final generation. Nobody knows how long a generation is, whether it's 40 years, 80 years, 120 years, or some other form of generation. It hasn't been the first one because we're already past that, but it could be 80 or 120, possibly, but no one knows the day or the hour. But in these end times, we're going to have wars, rumors of wars. We're going to have pestilences. We're going to have earthquakes. We're going to have floods. We're going to have volcanoes erupting. We're going to have natural disasters in places that we've never even thought of them before, and in diverse places. So you might think, oh, there's never been a storm here in 1,000 years, or 2,000 years, or 3,000 years. Well, that's probably the spot that's going to get hit next. And if you're in the middle of the desert, You know, you probably think, well, I probably don't need flood insurance because it's never flooded here. But guess what? A flood might be coming. You know, the earth was destroyed by flood at one point, and God promised never to do that again. But I think parts of the world could definitely, you know, the whole state of Florida could be underwater in a couple years. They have not invested in the infrastructure needed to protect themselves. I mean, and if all these tree huggers are right, talk about these, Green New Deal and all this bullshit, and you know, they want to pay trillions of dollars to lower the temperature 0.00001% in the next 50 years. You know, they want everyone driving electric, and they want everyone driving electric bicycles, and we won't have any nuclear power because they don't believe in nuclear power. They only believe in wind and solar. Wind and solar. That's only 3% of our energy needs, and to charge a Tesla, it costs double the cost of gas right now. And you know, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but we got a Sheets. I don't know. Now you know what kind of area I'm in when you got talking about Sheets, because not everyone has a Sheets. But I used to call it Shits. But I'm going to Shits. But Sheets. The average cost of Sheets for their Tesla charging stations $250,000 a year, and they're paying premium prices. Let's say that you get an Uber ride at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night after a hard night of drinking. Do you think you're going to pay $10 to go a mile? Hell no. You could be paying $500 to go 1 mile because you were paying 20 times or 50 times or whatever it is the normal rate because you're in peak hours. And nobody is charging their Tesla at the gas station at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Most of the time they're charging them in the middle of the day, during peak hours. They're paying peak prices. Wow, I've really got off on a tangent. I can't even remember what my initial argument, what I was even talking about in the beginning, because now I've gone so far off kilter. But I remember talking about natural disasters. But this is another way you get in trouble with homes. Let's say you buy a house, and let's say you're just going to waive that inspection because there's like 4 or 5 people bidding against it, and you want to lock in the home. Well, then you find out that you need a new roof. You find out that your HVAC system busted. You find out that there's cracks in the foundation. You find out that termites have eaten away all the lumber. You find out that you got leaks and mildew and mold and roaches and all these things, and now you're underwater. Now you wish you would have got those inspections. But what people do is they'll buy a second house, they'll buy a third house, a fourth house, fifth house, and rent those other ones out. And then eventually, once the renters pay for their house for them, then all that that rental income is income and cash flow for them. But let's say you buy a house and you get a squatter, and that squatter refuses to leave, and you're in a real liberal state that there's no rights to the homeowner. Let's say you get hacked or something, and somebody gets a hold of your deed and sells your home online to somebody else, and here your house is gone, and someone else has already sold your house to somebody else. And but then let's say you buy 2 or 3 houses and you can't find anyone to pay the rent. And then instead of, you having to pay a mortgage on $2,000 a month for one house, now you got to pay the mortgages on 5 houses and for $10,000 a month, and you only make $10,000 a month. And then you're in trouble. Because now you got 5 mortgages you got to pay on because you can't find anyone to rent your house. So it's not all daisies with real estate. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people have done really well in real estate and have got very, very rich. And one thing about real estate, that one reason Buffett doesn't like real estate that much, is most real estate is oftentimes fairly accurate. It's fairly priced. You're not going to, it's going to be hard to pay $1 and find a house that's worth $1 million. It's going to be hard to find a house that, Pablo Escobar has planted, 5 or 10 billion dollars in the walls of the house. And or you happen to go to the basement and old Aunt Judy had left her diamond necklace from World War II under a cupboard under the steps or something. Every once in a while you're gonna find a buried treasure, or maybe you'll find there was one person that bought a house and they had a little trailer in the back, and lo and behold, that little trailer had 250 paintings from a rare Mexican artist that was worth millions of dollars today. And so every once in a while you're going to hit the jackpot, but more often than not, you're going to be either, unless you're buying a fixer-upper, you're going to be paying fair value, or you're going to be overpaying. And it might take you several years before the house is even worth what you paid for it. But yeah, there's all kinds of things that can happen. The ground could break away. You could walk out your front step, and the ground breaks away, and you fall into a 30-foot ravine. The creek could overflow, and next thing you know, your house is 2 feet under, 2 stories underwater, and you be sitting on the roof like they were in Katrina, hoping for a helicopter to come pick them up. And but I don't want to scare people too much, but I just want people to know that bad things can happen and you can get in some serious trouble. Me personally, I do not want to be a slave to a mortgage for 30 years. I think the best way to do it is to get a 30-year mortgage, but make sure you pay it off in 15 years or less. And don't get the biggest house you can afford. Get something that you can live in and live in comfortably. I mean, the average home size 50 years ago, I want to say maybe longer than that, was 1,500 square feet. Today, the average home size is 2,500 square feet, and now we got single-parent homes instead of 2-parent homes a lot of times. And people, they buy the biggest house that they can't afford, and it's fine if you got a steady job and everything, and you work at the mill for 50 years or whatever, but people change jobs a lot more often. Me as a nurse, I definitely change jobs very often. Most companies nursing homes have gone bankrupt many, many times. They change names almost every day. You know, they get sued, they'll just change their name to something else. They get sued again, they go bankrupt, they just change the name to something else. Someone else buys them out. But you know, if you let's say you buy 3 houses and then you give them $2,000 a month on each house, and eventually after 10 years or whatever, you got all 3 homes paid off, and you're getting $6,000 a month for sitting on your butt and collecting a rent check. I mean, yeah, things are nice and rosy, but things can also go bad. There could be one house that that's just a money pit, or you can never find any renters, and everyone wants a two bath house, and you're stuck with this 1 bath house, and you can't even, people won't pay what it's worth just because it only has 1 bathroom. But anyway, all right, let me get off topic here, get back on topic, and let me play this damn video.
To demonstrate what I mean, let me introduce you to our friend John here. John has been working hard and saving money for years. He has done everything right financially and now has the ability to purchase a home. Let's take a closer look at John's true cost of living of buying a house. When buying a home, the first thing you have to consider is the down payment. In the US, there are some companies and government programs that offer low or even no money down mortgage options. However, these types of mortgages are generally considered relatively risky. Just look at the wave of foreclosures that happened during the Great Financial Crisis. These foreclosures skewed heavily towards individuals and families that bought at the peak of the market with little or no down payment.
I also want to say something else. The town I grew up in had 1 paper mill, and everyone in the city worked at this paper mill. And we had this big rich family that basically owned everything in the town, and gave everything to the town and the city, and then you had this big corporation, this big evil corporation that came in one day, and they promised that they would never ever shut this mill down, because if it did, it would destroy the lives of thousands of people and destroy this town. And just a couple years later, guess what they did? They shut the mill down. And guess what happened on every single street? There were foreclosures on every single street. Every single house had a for sale sign. Luckily, my personal family was not in that particular industry or business, so it didn't really affect us at all, but it hurt a lot of people. And you might think this town or this city is going to be around for a while, but there's a lot of cities and towns that are ghost towns now, and that slowly but surely, people just leave. Their industry shuts down. Maybe West Virginia or something, where the coal mines, where they shut all the coal mines down, and yeah, a lot of abandoned cities there, and there's no work. There's nowhere to find work, so you got to go to where the work is. Not everyone can be a YouTube streamer and make thousands of millions of dollars a year, like Mr. Beast, $30 million a year off of YouTube. And I mentioned this to my friend today also, that if you're in like a college city that is, the tuition's going up every single year, the college is growing, or there's multiple colleges, I think that area is going to be growing for a very long time. But if you're in a town that they got one industry, and something happens to that one business or that one industry, like there were a lot of towns that were built around, let's say, gold mines. There was a lot of towns that were built around, let's say, the railroad. There was a lot of towns that were built around the waterways. There was a lot of towns that were built around oil supply or something. But guess what? In 10 or 15 years, when that oil supply runs dry, the town dies. The town is dead. So when you are buying a house, and to me, you want to buy the least expensive house in a good neighborhood, because that will automatically boost your home value when you renovate it and fix it up a little bit. I've seen this around this area where someone has built a $5 or $10 million house, and then right next door is a trailer. It was a double wide. Now do you think that the double wide is more valuable now that it's next to that $10 million home? Yeah. But do you think that $5 or $10 million home is more valuable because it's next to a trailer? Hell no. So you also want to look at the neighbors and stuff, and you want to have a house that is, if you're buying a fixer-upper, buy the least expensive one on the block and fix it up, and then after you fix it up, then your house might be comparable to all the other ones, then you can make a nice little profit. But all right, anyway, back to the video.
That is why it is highly recommended that homebuyers have at least a 10 to 20% down payment when purchasing a home. Now, you also have to consider your mortgage.
Now, back in the day when people were buying like 1,500 square foot houses, it was almost mandatory that they had to put 20% down. And then, when Obama came along, he was like, well, it's not fair. We got to give everybody a house. Even the ones that can't afford it. We got to give everybody a house. It's the American dream. And then, so all these people, they're putting 5% down. They have no business buying a house. They can't make their credit card minimum payments. They have no business. If you can't even make a credit card minimum payment, you have no business buying a house and that kind of thing. But anyway, so instead of 20% down, now most people are putting 5% down or less. And me personally, with a VA loan, I would put 0 down, and all I'd have to pay is the closing costs, which might be $5,000 or less for a $100,000 house. But yeah, you went from having like a 1,500 square foot house, and people were putting 20% down. Now you got people buying a 2,500 square foot house, putting 5% down or less, and with job security, jobs are, you got even Amazon, these big companies, they lay off 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people at a time. And, if you, put all the eggs in the Amazon basket and you move to this city just because you want to work at Amazon, and then Amazon lays you off, well, now you're stuck with a mortgage payment in a area, and then you got to find another job. So to me, you also want to be somewhat flexible, because a lot of people aren't going to stay in the same job or even industry for 40 or 50 years. They might have to be changing jobs or industries every 5-10 years or maybe even every 2 or 3 years, depending on what they do. I mean, some jobs are seasonal. Maybe you're a fisherman or something or a crab fisherman, and maybe you only work 3 months out of the year. But at 3 months out of the year, you're busting your ass and you're earning enough money for the whole year. But what happens if an oil spill or something happens, and then you got to find something else? Then maybe you got to go to construction or something,
Mortgage interest rate. This is how much you have to pay a lender to be able to borrow the money needed to finance a house purchase. The current interest rate on a 30-year mortgage in the U.S. is approximately.
And back here, this was where I remember I said it was interest rates were at 18 at one time. I think when my parents bought their house, I think it was around 12. So right around here. I was born in the late 70s, so that kind of gives you kind of weigh my age a little bit, but yeah, I mean 12%, that's huge. But if you're getting 15% on bonds, government bonds, I mean 12% ain't that bad. And the reason we had to go all the way to zero, and the rates in other countries in Europe was actually negative at the time of COVID, is because the government and the governments around the world have so much debt. These corporations have so much debt. People have so much student loans. They have so much credit card and consumer debt that they can't pay these high interest rates. And the only reason we increased the interest rates in the short term here was COVID. They increased the money supply 40%. The savers, they basically taxed you 40%. All that money you had spent years and decades saving, in a blink of an eye, they just single-handedly gave you a 40% tax on your savings because they increased the money supply 40%. And then and they had to increase the interest rates to put a halt to this runaway inflation. I mean, imagine buying a car on Monday and it's $10,000. Then you go look at the car Tuesday and it's $11,000. And you go Wednesday and it's $12,000. And you go Thursday it's $14,000. And you go Friday it's $15,000. So people were buying and stockpiling goods on Monday, let's say, in this case, because they were worried about what Friday was going to look like. That's how crazy the prices were going. And I'm going to do a shout out to Dollar. I don't know, I get it all confused, but there's a dollar store, and they did a survey on 80% of the times they ring you up. Let's say you think you're buying an item for $1.99, and then they ring you up and it's like $2.50. Well, this is illegal, but this is how this company makes its money, and they do it dishonestly. And they did 80% of the items are mispriced. So you think you're buying an item for $2 or $3, or let's say you're buying cat litter for $6, $6.99, and then you get to the register and it's actually $10.99. And a lot of times it's not as drastic. It might be 5 cents here, 10 cents there, 25 cents here, and you don't pay attention. You don't pay attention to it. You don't notice it because it's a penny here, a penny there. But when they're selling and they got all these stores in all the poor areas, and they're going through hundreds of thousands of goods every day, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars a week off of these pennies that they're overcharging you. And they're basically just ripping you off. And they think you're too stupid to notice, and even if they get sued, they don't really care, because let's say they're ripping you off $500 million a week, and you sue them for $1 million, and it takes 2 years to go through the courts. Who gives a shit? You don't give a shit because you already made 200 million. You're making 200 million a week off of these idiots that don't know they're getting ripped off every damn day. They're too stupid to look at their receipts and see that they're getting ripped off every damn day.
Approximately 7%, making it the most costly time to borrow money to buy a house in roughly 2 decades.
Let me say that again. The most costly time to buy a house in nearly 2 decades. That's 20 years. A decade is 10 years. 2 times 10 is 20. The most costliest time to buy a house in more than 20 years.
Now the math gets a little complicated, but for simplicity, at a 7% interest rate, approximately 7% of your loan balance is getting paid to the bank in the form of interest each and every year. As you're about to see,
basically you're buying the bank a house and a half plus a new car, plus a Mercedes. So after you buy the bank a house and a half and plus a Mercedes, then you can get your house.
the interest number can really add up over the life of a mortgage. Third is private mortgage insurance, or PMI for short. For borrowers with less than 20% down payments, lenders typically require PMI. This is essentially an insurance policy that protects the lender in the event the borrower stops making payments. PMI can add a few $100s to the monthly mortgage payment depending on the loan balance. Fourth, we have property taxes. This cost can vary dramatically based on the state, but is typically calculated.
Now, I got a warning to people that I just saw recently a newspaper article in my area where people were basically buying their house for, let's say, $250, and then when they got the property tax bill, the state had valued their home at $500,000. So instead of paying property taxes on a house that's worth $250, you're now paying property taxes on a home that's worth $500,000. Now your home's not worth $500,000, but this bureaucrat is saying it's worth $500,000, which is, a fantasy. He must be sipping on some of that Bitcoin juice, some of that Dogecoin.
As an annual percentage based on your home's appraised value. Depending on the state, sometimes property taxes can exceed a house's mortgage payment. Money collected from property taxes goes to fund local services such as schools, libraries, local government, and first responders. Property taxes can range from a couple of $1,000s in low cost of living states to tens of thousands of dollars for expensive houses in high tax states. Next on the list, we have homeowners insurance. Homeowners insurance helps cover the cost of replacing or repairing a home in the event it gets damaged or destroyed. If you have a mortgage, odds are you're going to be legally required to carry homeowners insurance as a way to protect the lender in the event the house gets damaged or destroyed. Similar to property taxes, this cost will also vary widely depending on what part of the country you're in. Homes located in areas of the country that are prone to natural disasters will pay higher rates than homes located.
And like I said, the insurance companies are not idiots. Let's say your house gets hit by a hurricane and it gets demolished, and you see all these people on TV, they're crying because their home just got wiped away and everything they own is gone, and all they got is the clothes on their back. Well, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is, I would say, if your house gets hit by a hurricane or something, they say, "Oh, well, I got hurricane insurance." They're like, "No, well, you actually got hit by a twister or a dust storm or something, but you don't got any dust insurance. So we're not going to buy you a new house because this hurricane hit you, because even though you got hurricane insurance, we're saying the cause was a dust storm and a big old cactus, a big old wind came and grabbed a big old cactus and smashed all your windows and went through the other side and knocked the whole house down because you wanted to have real green and a real electric house. I mean, you got glass panels on every side, floor to ceiling. You got solar panels. You even got a little windmill in the backyard, or a little wind farm trying to catch a little bit of energy. And this big old cactus came by and just knocked your whole home down and blew it down. Or maybe a big wind gust came and knocked it down, or maybe your area has a bunch of trees around it protecting your house, and then somebody chops all the trees down, and now you got no protection against the wind. And there's all kinds of things that can happen, and you got to have the exact insurance for the exact disaster that's going to happen. But with the Bible, if you believe in the Bible, there's going to be natural disasters at diverse places. And people might say, well, I don't live near any volcanoes. I would say get every damn insurance they got. If they got volcano insurance and you live on a desert island, get volcano insurance. If they got wind insurance, get wind insurance. But I don't know what pestilence or natural disaster is going to happen. I mean, the obvious ones are fire, water, high winds, tornadoes, volcanoes. Could be a big asteroid comes down and you're right smack dab of 50 other houses, but that one little asteroid that's only like 5 feet in diameter, plowing to the earth at the speed of light, has just sent your house 50 feet underground, and now your home is a little crater. And the only thing you got of your house left is one little picture of your mom and dad, and maybe a little teddy bear, and everything else is destroyed. And you didn't have asteroid insurance, you didn't have volcano insurance, you didn't have wind insurance. They ain't gonna pay you shit.
In safer areas. The average homeowner's insurance policy in the United States is approximately $150 to $200 a month. As if these 5 costs weren't already enough, number 6 on our list is repairs and maintenance. Over time, things in a house break and need to be replaced. These repair costs are one of the biggest hidden costs of owning a home and can sneak up on homeowners. Repair costs can range from a few $100s for a plumber to repair a leaky pipe, to $10,000 to replace the HVAC system, to over $15,000 to get a new roof put on. As a rough rule of thumb, it is recommended to budget 1 to 2% of the home value each year to account for these costs. Now let's see how all these costs apply to our
1 to 2%.
friend John here. For the sake of this example, let's say the typical house in John's area is selling for $500,000. If John wants to have a 20% down payment, he will have to come out of pocket $100,000. That means John will have to borrow the remaining $400,000 in the form of a mortgage to purchase the house. At a 7%
Look at this total cost of a loan. You're buying a $400,000 house, but it ends up being, and it's even going to go higher. Watch this.
percent interest rate on a 30-year mortgage. John's monthly payment would be $2,000.
So you think you're buying a $500,000 house, but really you paid a cool $1 million.
$661. John put 20% down, so he isn't required to pay PMI. We can put 0 for that cost item. As a homeowner, John is also going to have property taxes. Assuming annual property taxes of 1.2% of the home's value, that comes out to $6,000 a year or $500 a month. Next up is homeowners insurance, and let's pencil that in at $200 a month. On maintenance, if John sets aside 1% of the property's value each year to account for repairs, that's another $5,000 a year, or about $417 a month. This brings John's total cash out-of-pocket costs to $3,778 a month.
Sorry guys, give me 1 sec here.
Month with $100,000 down on a $500,000 house. The costs associated with homeownership don't stop there. There's an often overlooked cost associated with buying a home that most people make the huge
But wait, there's more.
mistake of ignoring. In fact, this cost is the exact reason why Warren Buffett delayed buying a house until his net worth was a whopping 10 times larger than the down payment on his eventual home purchase. What I'm referencing is something referred to as opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the potential benefits that someone misses out on when choosing one option over another. This is why Warren Buffett didn't want to buy a house. The money that he tied up making the home purchase could no longer be used to generate high investment returns in the stock market.
Did you know that
And let's remember, Buffett said, I will promise you anything under $1 million, I get you a 50% return.
30, 40, or even 50% annually.
And that's annually. You know, you remember back when I said home values go up 2% a year with inflation, generally? You know, he was getting 50% annual returns.
These are returns he would have been sacrificing if he bought a house earlier. I know you aren't Warren Buffett. However, historically the stock market has dramatically outperformed single-family houses in terms of returns. Because of this, there is an opportunity cost associated with using money as a down payment on a house versus investing that money in the stock market. Going back to our example with John, let's assume there is a 6% annual opportunity cost on the $100,000 he put down to purchase the house. This means that John has an opportunity cost of $6,000 a year or $500 a month. Opportunity cost brings John's total monthly cost of
Hang on 1 sec.
owning a home up to $4,278 a month, much higher than just his original monthly mortgage payment. Now, of course, this example here is rough math. There are probably some costs or benefits that we are missing. However, it does demonstrate the point that from a purely financial standpoint, owning a home is much more costly than most people realize. Compare that to renting. When you rent, calculating your monthly cost is super simple. It is whatever the rent amount is, and that's pretty much it. At least in the US, renters typically aren't responsible for things like property taxes, maintenance, or homeowners insurance. Right now is the cheapest it's ever been to rent compared to buying a home. As an example, look at this neighborhood in Indianapolis, Indiana. Homes in this neighborhood are selling for $500,000, which, as we talked about earlier, would cost around $4,300 a month to own. These same types of homes can be rented for anywhere from $1,700 to $2,300, literally right down the street. While this is just one neighborhood in one city, this trend is true throughout the country. In fact, there are only 4 US cities where it is cheaper to buy than to rent. Just to show you how wild things are right now, Let's take a look at this graphic. Dating back to 1970, it is
This thing is just bonkers to me. Look at this. It's just like a parabolic, straight up. Everyone ever seen an exponential growth chart? You know, I mean, this thing is just almost in a straight line. This is a bubble, guys. If people thought this was a bubble, this is a bubble on steroids. And it's not going to end well. And this thing's going to come all the way down here. All the way down here. And it may even go down here or maybe even further. Who knows? But this is a bubble, guys. This is a bubble. And everyone thinks, oh, are you going to keep getting... my home's going to keep going up 40% every year. Every year it's going to go up 40%. 40% going up 15% every year. No, this is a bubble. What goes up must come down. There's something called gravity. This is a bubble, guys. To rent, you're paying almost $1,000 less a month than it would be to buy. The biggest numerical gap in cost between owning a home and renting in over 50 years. So like, all right, well, when was the time to buy? Well, right here, when you could buy from $190 and the rent was $225. This would have been a good time to buy. You could have bought down here. After the housing crisis, do you see how long the lag is? It started in 2006, but it actually did not end really. It was still going down all the way almost to 2014. So, what's that, 8 years? Almost a decade? Almost a decade. It took almost a decade of things just steadily going down. So this thing might go like this to 2032, and it might even continue down after that. You know, the real estate in the U.S. is, I think, I might be wrong with this, but I think the U.S. real estate is basically 75% of the real estate of the whole world. 75% of the value of all the world's real estate is in the U.S. And I don't know if that's an accurate statement. I heard it somewhere. I don't know if that's accurate. I might be inaccurate. Well, don't kill me if I'm wrong on that, but it's a very high percentage of the world's real estate. So to me, if I'm gonna buy a house, I'd rather go buy it in a country where it's cheap. And even if the home values aren't as high, you may not get as much rent. But if they're undervalued in Mexico, I would be buying a house in Mexico maybe. And then that could be cash flowing over here. Just have someone you trust maybe that collect the payments and send them to you, or have a company that manages your real estate over there. And but there's always the idiots thing. Back when Tulip Mania was going on and people were quitting their jobs and selling one tulip for the price of a house. That was a bubble. That was a bubble, guys. If anyone cannot tell that this is a bubble, just look at this chart. This is a bubble right here. This thing is parabolic. And look at the time. This isn't even like, this is a very short period of time compared to history. And, you know, people thought this was expensive. And then look at this. And then look at this. I mean, this is the housing bubble, 1,500, and we're at 26. And this is like a bubblicious everything bubble, where you got stocks overpriced, you got the bonds overpriced, you got gold overpriced, you got Bitcoin overpriced, you got food overpriced, you got groceries, you got gas overpriced, you got everything overpriced. And it's not going to end well. It's not going to end good. There's going to be foreclosures on every single street. It's going to be layoffs on every single company. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And hopefully there's not. Who knows? We could even have another civil war. There's so much. There's going to be blood in the streets. And when there's blood in the streets, that's the time to buy.
It's never been this much more expensive to buy versus rent, and as you can see, it's not even close. So now that we have established that buying a home isn't necessarily cheaper than renting when factoring all the hidden costs, I want to get to the core of why Buffett says buying a house can be a subpar investment.
So this is pickleball? It's basically tennis for... Oh, yeah. Oh.
Let's go back to our friend John from earlier. Let's say John lives in his house for 10 years. After those 10 years of making monthly mortgage payments, his loan balance will have been reduced to $343,250. In calculating John's financial return, there's also the very nuanced factor of home price appreciation that you have to consider. Over the long term, home prices tend to keep up with inflation.
This is where we increase the money supply 40%.
However, so do things like repairs, property taxes, and insurance. So let's say that John's home appreciates at an average annual rate of 2%. That means at the end of 10 years, John's home will be worth approximately $610,000. However, when John goes to sell the house, he will have to pay closing costs and commissions. This typically accounts for about 8% of the home's value, meaning John's net sales price will be $561,200. Subtracting out the loan balance of $343,250 leaves John with cash in his pocket of nearly $218,000. Using his $100,000 down payment as the base, that means that John's money grew at an average rate of about 8% in the 10 years he owned the house. If we redo the numbers and assume the house appreciated at 1%, John's implied return falls to about 5%. Compare that return to what John would have had if he instead invested that $100,000 into the stock market. Additionally, for the sake of this example, let's say John can invest an additional $5,000 a year with the money he saved by renting, as we talked about earlier. Assuming the long-term return of the stock market of 10%, at the end of the 10 years, John's $100,000 would have turned into $339,000. This works out to an implied annual return of 13%. In this example here, John would have been better off financially if he would have passed on buying a house and instead invested that money in the stock market. This is exactly what Warren Buffett means when he says that often buying a house is a mediocre financial investment. That's because when you buy a house, you are making a highly levered bet on the home price appreciation. To put it another way, you are using a lot of debt to buy a house in the hopes that home prices will keep rising. If you put a 10% down payment and home prices rise 10%, you can double your money. However, with that same 10% down payment, If home values fall 10%, you lose 100% of your money. Without the effects of leverage, the financial returns from buying a house would look even more mediocre. These numbers we just talked through earlier in the video help explain why even wealthy Americans are choosing to rent instead of buy. Now, we have spent this video talking about the financial returns from buying.
Well, there you go, guys. Sorry for my long rants on other things, but yeah, I mean, I want to be a homeowner one day, but for me personally, if I can't find something that's that makes sense, I would rather buy a piece of land and build a little tiny house and just pay it off in a couple years and not 30 years, and then you could rent out that little tiny house and upgrade but by then you might be paying cash for the house. You're not going to be a slave to a mortgage for 30 years or 15 years and paying HOA fees and all these other things. You know, you could get a rainwater collector in the backyard and you got water stockpiled, and you could grow some fruits and vegetables. You could have animals. You could have everything you need to survive and be self-sufficient. And I think a lot of people are choosing to do that now. If you grow your own food, if you have your own water, and you have your own electricity, maybe you do got a solar panel or two, and you don't need that much money to sustain yourself. Living very frugally. Now, of course, the key would be to amass a fortune first, and then go and then go live frugally, and you can just live off of the dividends. And whenever you need money, just go grab a little bit of your dividends every month. But yeah, I just do not. In Los Angeles, they even have 50-year mortgages now. I mean, that's how crazy this stuff is. Like, they have 50. They're even doing 50-year mortgages now. And like car companies, for example, like here, I'm a sucker myself. I got a 7-year. 7-year car payment, but a lot of people they'll get a 7-year, then in 5 years they'll get a new car, and then they're a slave all over again, and then they just keep repeating the same cycle. You have to get out of debt. You have to get out of the cycle, and to start building some real wealth. If you're paying interest to somebody else, you're making them rich. You're making the banks rich. They're charging you 7 and 8%, and before your house is ever paid off, you've already bought them at least one full another house. You saw the $500,000 example where the house in the end, the payments that you would have made after the 30 years was almost $1 million. So really, it wasn't a $500,000 house. You paid $1 million for that $500,000 house, which to me is nuts, which is crazy. Why would you pay $1 million for a $500,000 house? Anyway, But grants to, you know, if you're starting a family and, you know, or, you know, you need a place for your kids and loved ones, you know, there's nothing wrong with home ownership. You know, I just think things are very expensive right now. And the rule of thumb, I want to say that you weren't supposed to put more than like 22% of your take-home pay to housing. And nowadays, a lot of people, they're paying 50% of their income is going to housing. And when you're paying 50% of your income to housing, there's no way you can save 50%. That, you know, because you got to pay for food, you got to pay for gas, you got to pay for everything else, transportation. Just be very careful. You know, a lot of people, they buy the biggest house that they could possibly afford, and let's say you go to the realtor and be like, all right, my budget's $100,000, and what's the first home they show you? The first home they show you is $150,000. And then your wife says, "Oh well, honey, I love it. This is paradise. You know, we can cut some corners here and there. We can make it work. We can make the math work." And then you end up paying $150,000 for a house that you can't afford, and you know, you miss one payment, and they'll take their house away. The one good news about Florida, I would say, is, you know, Mike Tyson is a perfect example of this. You know, remember he got sued for millions of dollars, but he had $1 million house and they couldn't touch it. He owed millions of dollars, but they couldn't touch his home. So that's a good thing about Florida is, you know, if you ever go to jail or something and get a big lawsuit against you, you can't lose your house. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys and gals.